Hello, everyone. It's Marie again. Welcome to a special little episode The Chilling Psychology of Forgotten Serial Killers. This is a deep dive into the disturbing mental landscape of lesser known serial killers and the forgotten narratives and unsettling psychological underpinnings of their crimes, offering a fresh perspective on true crime. So, what if the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones we remember, but the ones that we've completely forgotten? We often discuss the most infamous cases, but the chilling truth hides in the shadows. Some of the most disturbing minds have slipped through the cracks of history, and their true horror has yet to be fully understood. Perhaps we need to open our minds up a little bit to looking at those lesser known cases. Prepare to delve into the forgotten psychological landscape of pure evil. So here's my direct challenge for you guys. Do you think you know serial killers? I mean, deeply think about that. We're not talking about Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer today. These are names that we all notoriously know. We're unearthing the chilling stories of forgotten perpetrators, individuals whose heinous acts and twisted psychologies have been lost to time, but whose impact still resonates far beyond the obscurity that they've fallen into. So, are y'all ready to talk about and face the monsters that often get forgotten? I'm going to start this out by talking about a case that took place in Tennessee in the early 2000s. This particular case happened with a man by the name of Tony Garrett Mitchell. And this is what you need to know about Tony Garrett Mitchell's case. Um, his first victim was actually someone I went to elementary, middle, and high school. I actually met her when I was in the fifth grade. And I wouldn't say she was a very close friend, but she was a classmate. I was in several different classes with her. And I mean, I knew who she was. We rode the same bus. We often lived in the same areas. So she was someone that was present often. And with that said, I want to take a moment to express how much I sympathize with the victims of any case like this and their families. And how, when we do this, we need to not just talk about the name of the person who did this atrocious act, but also honor and respect the family and the names of the victims. So, that being said, say her name, rest in peace, Diana Pulse. So, Tony Garrett Mitchell studied to be a serial killer. It was a role that he thought would make him famous. He dove deep into this. He studied and read books on the subject, and he was apparently a huge avid fan of the movie American Psycho. During his preliminary hearing, the question was asked of him why he chose to kill these girls, and he said, "There's not that many black serial killers, and I wanted to be famous." Family members of his first victim, Diana Pulse, who was 18, shook their head in horror at that statement. Mitchell of Columbia, Tennessee, alternately smirked and sat stone-faced as graphic details of his statements to police about the murder of Diana Pulse on July 4th and Pam Tate Gordon, 39, on July 14th, and also the wounding of Joyce Clark, age 42, on August the 4th. As these were read and played on cassette tape, Tony Garrett Mitchell didn't even seem fazed. After more than 3 hours of testimony, the Murray County General Sessions Court Judge Jimmy Matthews sent the case to the Murray County Grand Jury. This happened in Tennessee again. Murray County Public Defender Claudia Jack, who was representing Mitchell, said that her client had pled not guilty and that she would have nothing more to add to that point in the prosecution. Mr. Mitchell said he felt a great sensation when he shot Diana, like a release. FBI Special Agent Stephen Dickey, who created a criminal profile of the killer, testified during the hearing. He said that he felt a rush, explaining that he just got away with murder. After uh, That killing, Dickey testified that Mitchell went to the Murray County Library and read Anatomy of a Serial Killer and Body Count, the story of a serial killer who strangled his victims. He said he had a bad outlook on women, even a hatred for women, because they had lied, cheated, and stole from him all of his life. He also tortured animals, the agent testified. At age 15, he observed a bird with a broken wing in his yard, and he got the lawnmower and chose to run it over. He killed it. At age 21, Mitchell killed 2 cats, strangling one and killing the other with a hammer. He commented he learned from reading about serial killers that killing and torturing of animals was a common trait among them, and he said it must be something in the genes. Mitchell, 23 years old, told officers he lured his first 2 victims into his vehicle with the promise of drugs, the third with an offer of money. He took Diana Pulse to his motel room at the Hamilton Inn in Columbia, Tennessee, where they smoked marijuana. Then on the way back to Columbia, he told her to roll the back window down, and when she turned around, he shot her in the back of the head. Mitchell was almost caught that night when a sheriff's deputy shined a spotlight on him outside Hamilton Inn. There was a fireworks stand near there, and he thought the sheriff's deputy thought he was going to break into the fireworks stand. Instead, Mitchell went across the street to the Polk Arms apartment and washed the blood off of his clothing in the laundry room. It took 2 shots to kill Pam Tate Gordon, Mitchell told police. After he shot Pamela, she slumped toward him, her arms started shaking, and he thought she was dead. But she sat up and said, "What happened? Something stung me." That's when he shot her again. Mitchell said the third intended victim, Joyce Clark, was real nervous and asked a bunch of questions. Again, he asked her to roll down the passenger side window, but she didn't turn all the way around like the others, and she kept watching him. When the bullet missed Clark, she began fighting. Joyce broke his ignition key off in the ignition and broke his wiper blade control arm as she was struggling. Mitchell said that she would not let go of his gun. Then Mitchell recalled to come back to myself about that time and stopped the vehicle and ordered her out. She couldn't exit the vehicle because a bullet had disabled the passenger door latch. Mitchell finally got her out of the car by getting out on his side and letting her crawl across the console and exit the vehicle on the driver's side. She was still holding onto the gun, he said. It was then Dickey said that Mitchell knew he would be caught. In fact, the criminal profile that Dickey compiled of the killer was, as Sellers put it, dead on. He said he would be 25 to 35 years old, a black male, wouldn't live where the victims live. Mount Pleasant is his comfort zone, and he wouldn't get rid of the weapon because he had some sort of attachment to it. Mount Pleasant is also in Murray County, Tennessee. It is not far from Columbia, maybe 15-20 minute drive. The gun, a .38 caliber Rossi revolver that Mitchell purchased for $40, was found on the nightstand in room 129 of the Goose Creek Inn on August 13th, the day that Mitchell was arrested, Sellers said. Mitchell was charged with first-degree murder and especially aggravated kidnapping in the connection with the death of Diana Pulse and Pamela Garden, and attempted first-degree murder and especially aggravated kidnapping in connection with the shooting and wounding of Joyce Clark. Mitchell was then sent to Williamson County Jail to be held for protection, and he was eventually found guilty for what he did to these women. And it gets really bad. Like, actually, I can go back to that day, and at the time I was married, and my ex-husband actually worked in Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. And Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, where he worked, was near the municipal airport. And the municipal airport that day had been basically blockaded, and there were police blockades everywhere. So he was getting off work that morning because he worked night shift that week. And it was like 7 o'clock in the morning, and he was about to go and get off work and come home. And like I said, it's a 15 to 20 minute drive. And so it was maybe 8 o'clock and he still wasn't home. And I called him and I was like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Did you not see my text messages?" And of course I hadn't, because I had been asleep. But I called him when I woke up and seen immediately, without checking any messages, what was going on. And he said that he was held up because there was a police blockade because they had found a young woman's body, and she was completely disrobed from the waist down, with her legs positioned spread eagle and missing some digits on one of her hands. And of course, I was astonished. I was just appalled and shocked, but I did not know at the time that this was actually someone that I went to school with. That information did not come out until later. And part of the reason why I said let's delve into some forgotten psychological landscapes of evil is because of the fact that, I mean, I doubt very many people have even heard of this story. And that's mostly because when we do a deep dive in underlying psychological drivers that differ from more famous serial killers, focusing on those nuances kind of seems, you know, like it's rudimentary in a way. Like you just expect that people should already go, oh, well, that's a terrible story. And because it's similar along the lines of these huge, terrible, internationally known cases, people assume that it's going to just, be known. But the reality is, there is a severe lack of support post crime for victims and their family. This is a problem that we continually find. And so, if we can explore lost crime and typologies, we might be able to, bring those lesser known cases back to the surface to give those families closure, to respect the victims in a way that doesn't make it seem like the person who is attempting to try to make a name for themselves off of doing atrocious things, such as the case of Tony Garrett Mitchell and wanting to be famously known as the first black serial killer. This is the ambition and the mentality that they have. And it feels like it's really important that we look beyond the typical calling card, um, and highlight how a lack of public attention can isolate victim families and underscore the critical need for that advocacy. And we sometimes get so caught up in a mentality of trying to unpack the psychology of the serial killer that it sort of, well, it kind of steamrolls the victim's story, and I don't want to do that. So it's an unsettling realization that a lack of theatrics can make a killer even more terrifying, and how this quiet horror can impact a struggle for remembrance and justice for their victims. Um, Jeffrey Dahmer's a big case because he killed a lot of men of color, and, you know, the police didn't do very much to stop those events from occurring. And then even when they found out that they occurred, they had such a lack of concern, and they really didn't care enough to do what they should have done, because if they would have done proper investigation early on and listening to the families that were talking about the missing people that were involved with him in various cases, they would have uncovered what he was doing long before, and it would have probably stopped and prevented many victims from finding their ill-fated pathway to losing their lives at his hands. So, um, the impact of those forgotten crimes on victims, families, and communities is really big, and it's often denied widespread closure and remembrance, making sustained victim advocacy paramount for healing and recognition. And those are the people that these terrible things happen to them because of the actions of these people that have been made notorious. But they have their own stories, and their families have stories, and they're more than just the victim of these people. They are the people that they were, and the memories and the moments that they made with their loved ones. And those connections are still living, breathing people in the now, who forever will have this shadow attached to their family. And, I'm sure that many people that have been the relatives of some of these victims who've later had somebody come on doing a special show on Jeffrey Dahmer have told and said their stories and shared their interviews, and eventually they get exhausted of hearing about it. And then we have this just constant commercialization off of that story. I don't even know how many Jeffrey Dahmer movies and series there have been done at this point, but I know that there's several, if and many. And yet, when we look at this story of Tony Garrett Mitchell, like I said, this happened around the year 2002, and that was 23 years ago. But I have not seen very much or heard very much about this in any true crime communities that I'm a part of. And I feel like that just kind of amplifies why I've decided to talk about this. Because these cases challenge our perception of what a typical serial killer looks like and how they operate. And yet they still do fall under that serial killer category. So we need to look at how we can evolve victim advocacy strategies to meet diverse needs and the crucial lessons that we can take from these forgotten cases as they offer towards a modern criminal profiling and investigative technique, and the direct contribution to more effective identification of perpetrators and enhancing support for victims in the future. And I feel like that's just really important. The ethical considerations of re examining these cases and bringing light without glorifying the perpetrator while consistently prioritizing the dignity and remembrance of victims through respectful advocacy is detrimental at this point. Why understanding these overlooked monsters is vital for a comprehensive view of human darkness, and how that knowledge empowers victim advocacy organizations so that they can better support those impacted by similar silent evils. And honestly, my final thought on this is the chilling truth. Some of the most disturbing evil hides in plain sight and yet goes unremembered, emphasizing our collective responsibility to champion victim advocacy and ensure that no one is forgotten. Until next time, y'all enjoy your Sunday night. Peace out from Cy Marie.